we made out last time, yesterday, that supra-rational is the direction of the life force working in the individual and collective life. That is what we saw last time. Yesterday, we saw that the trend of movement of life seems to be something that wants to be independent of the government of reason. Reason certainly tries to impose its discipline on life, but life generally takes its own course. And as it is derived from the infra-rational movement below human level, it has so much force in it that reason is not able to put a stable government or introduce a stable order into the working of the life force that we find in the world. One. Secondly, that if you observe the working of life, it doesn't seem to be primarily, directly, or essentially interested in ethics, religion, art, philosophy, morality, any of the high ideals which mind is able to conceive. Life does not seem to be directly interested in it. Life runs to its own course of interest, desires, impulses, satisfaction of desires, and so on. When it takes even some high ideal, it takes it as a decoration just outside its fringe, but its main central direction is towards satisfying its interest, impulses, and vital needs and desires of the body, and so on. That is the main movement of life in the individual as well as in the collectivity. When we look at the collective life, a society or a nation or a group, there also we find that people would argue or perhaps say that we have there some values of life which are higher, ethical values, standards of good and bad, good conduct and bad conduct, right and wrong, truth and falsehood, and so on, justice and injustice. We have higher values. But if you observe the movement, he says, of the collective life also, its main purpose is to satisfy interests of the collectivity, desires of the collectivity, ambitions of the collectivity, impulses of the collectivity. Keep it under check so that the infra-rational may not express itself. One may not find the disorderliness of animal life into human life. That is all that the higher values come to ultimately. And if it adds anything of aesthetics or ethics or religion or philosophy, it is just as an ornament or more or less an acquirement which just to embellish life, but life lives for its own sake. Whatever order reason try to impose upon life is a temporary and provisional order, one. And secondly, the control which reason is able to exercise over life is always partial. These facts we have seen. And then yesterday night we saw that the movement of life force is not towards satisfying reason in its demand, but satisfying its own demand for something infinite. Life is a movement towards something absolute, something infinite, something you can say it is seeking its own absolute in all the movements. And it cannot be satisfied by any amount of work of reason. Life has to seek its absolute, and this absolute it can only have if it centers itself round, if it puts before itself the spirit as the goal and the manifestation of the spirit as the purpose of life in individual and collective mold, then it is possible that it might come to a stage where its desire for absolute joy or absolute delight or absolute love or absolute power would be really satisfied here in life. Well, that is, life is therefore, he called imprisoned supra-rational. Life is not something that would come under the realm of reason, under the guardianship or under the command of reason, but it is something that is supra-rational. Only it is imprisoned in the mold of matter, in inconscience. It is surrounded by animal impulses which it has derived from the animal origin, and therefore it is now crabbed, imprisoned. But in its origin, it owes its origin to the supreme infinite consciousness force. The power that life has is power of the supreme, and therefore it seeks to go towards realizing of that supreme origin, which means life is something supra-rational imprisoned, seeking again to reach its supra-rational manifestation in life. Now, therefore, he said yesterday's argument was that only by growth into that identity with the self, life can satisfy its need for the absolutes. The need for the absolute can be satisfied by life growing by identity with that which is at work behind her, in her, through her. And then it might now suggest itself, says he in this chapter, that if intellectual, aesthetic, ethical, and utilitarian cultures are not sufficient to guide man to the goal which is seeking the realization of the absolutes of life or the infinite, then culture must be a spiritual culture in order to guide man to that, so that he may grow into the spirit by identity. Then at once the idea suggests itself, then why not take a hold of religion? Because that might lead man to this infinite, source which life is seeking. Well, here he argues that can it be religion who can lead man to this fulfillment of life? That would seem to be the way. All societies have done that and tried that. And because in the life there is some great need, and some truth of constitution of human nature requires some appeal to some direction towards, infinite, or a source which is beyond the senses, beyond the intelligence, beyond the mind. Awakened intelligence even requires something to reach out to. But today it doesn't seem that man's need for this growth into his supra-rational origin and realization of it in life could be satisfied by organizing or instituting a religion. Religion would not succeed in fulfilling the need of man. Organized religions have, in fact, in the past retarded progress of man towards the ultimate truth, his inmost spirit. Of course, it is not religion alone that is retarded. Other ideals also which came as competitive to religious ideal, democracy for instance, that also has not always worked wonders. It has also retarded man's progress. So that the wrong has not been only on the part of religion, but all ideals which men have tried to put into life. They have also gone wrong, and that is not due because religion is particularly wrong, but because man has in his constitutional supra-rational instruments. Man is working with his life and mind and emotion and body and so on, which are infra-rational in their origin. And so with this infra-rational instrumentality, when it takes all of any great or true ideal, well, it gets cramped and limited, and then it goes wrong. Ideal is all right of equality or democracy or freedom of man, or you see, individual rational reason and it's a right to judge and so on. But it has to work through the instruments which are infra-rational in their origin, which are derived from the animal, vegetable kingdom and the material in conscience. Well, because religion alone has not gone wrong, he says, even democracy and even paganism, when it was there, well, they killed Socrates in the name of morality or religion, is it not? Then there was no religion. But yes, so see, religion has stood also in the way of philosophy and science. So they had to almost attack religion in order to protect themselves and go forward, you see. In politics also religion tried to intervene and catch hold of power and retard the political progress of man towards equality. It supported constitutions which are unjust. I mean, which were not at all based on what you might call the ideal of justice. The social and political inequality was supported by many religions, not only Christian, but many other religions have supported it. So if you say that religion can save man and make him realize the inner soul by which he can grow into that identity with his inmost being and move towards the absolute, then he says it would not be the outer organization of religion, but religion is the inner sense of experience. That may, but organized religion will not be able to perform that function or discharge that duty. Seeking after God and reliance on an inner experience, in that sense, religion can lead man to the fulfillment of seeking which life itself is trying to move towards in the individual and collective life. That cannot be a cult or a creed or a church or any organized religion. To live in the spirit and not to give up the narrow exaltation which sometimes religiosity gives. So, intellectual formulas which religion imposes as credo, which you must believe in, or form of ceremonies or form of rituals on which to which they stick and insist upon. Well, all that has to go. If we say religion can save, it is religion minus the credo, intellectual belief which are imposed, or ceremonies and forms of ritual which have reason into a sort of sacrosanct customs or the indispensability. Well, they have to be dispensed with, he says. But these are only aids, this ceremony and credo and so on. The real essence is that there must be a complete freedom for the human soul to grow into its inmost truth. That would be seeking for the reality or the truth which he is in his own self by an inner effort. Well, that is the core of religion, that is the essence of religious life. And then there must be complete freedom, therefore, and toleration for the human spirit to be allowed to grow into this inner truth. So, an organized religion generally is not tolerant. It's not doesn't believe that anything else could do. What it can or it promises to do or it undertakes to do. Really speaking, therefore, he says that it must not be religion, but we must say it is spiritual life or spirituality, because spirituality is that effort of the human spirit or human being or human nature which seeks its inmost truths by a dynamic or active effort. An active effort done by the human individual trying to realize his own inmost truths, truth of the world, truth of the divine, or truth of the reality. Well, that would be spirituality. And spirituality can solve this problem if it is not removed from the earth. Because there are spiritual attitudes in which you are requested or asked to fulfill the condition that you must be away from life, renounce life in order to realize the spirit. Well, we are talking of fulfillment of life now. We are dealing in this book, Human Cycle. We are looking at where would be the fulfillment of life. Well, if a attitude requires you to renounce life, then life would have no chance of fulfillment. Therefore, he says, well, a spirituality, but spirituality which does not renounce life. That must be their condition. It should not reject earth life. Then it has a message for life and society. Each principle is fulfilled in its own field. Then it would follow its own, true function, and that which denies fulfillment to each function of human nature, is emotional nature, is intellectual nature, is vital nature, seeking for some fulfillment. If spirituality or religion comes and denies that fulfillment, then also it would not be the right solution. For instance, sorrow, constant infliction of sorrow upon oneself, or suffering or mortification. A religion might require mortification of the body sometimes. Well, that, he says, would not lead to the fulfillment. It can only temporarily put off some difficulties. Such a pessimistic attitude, or an attitude in which the human instrument is not allowed or not permitted to reach its fulfillment, would be denial of real spirituality. Europe has made the ordinary earthly life our one preoccupation, and rationalistic attitude towards it is one side of it, and ascetic attitude towards life is another attitude. You see, worship of life, so to say, earthly life is one preoccupation. And all work of life has to be seen from the rationalistic individual point of view. There is another attitude towards life which takes up an ascetic attitude and seeks fulfillment by renouncing life. So both are outside the real working of spiritual force or spirituality in life. Both. Because reason will have to be overpassed and ascetic attitude towards life will have to be given up. Because we seek a fulfillment of life. And life not seeking reason at its governor, well, it will naturally require the attitude of the Western mind towards life, governed by practical reason, has also to be overpassed, as the ascetic attitude of people who demand and renunciation or rejection of life is a primary condition, that also goes outside the field of our acceptance. Both have to be changed. The reason has to be overpassed, ascetic attitude has to be given up, because life has to be fulfilled in its legitimate demands, which is demand for perfect expression of the inmost spirit, seeking for knowledge, seeking for fulfillment of absolute love, or seeking for absolute delight, or seeking for true power. Well, these are functions which really can be fulfilled if life reaches its true essential origin and realizes that and expresses it in life. So, well, spiritual man can and would guide man if individuals and societies would accept the guidance, because there was a time in some societies where the seer of truth, or one who had the vision of reality, was the guide of the social life of man through the politics, through the political constitution. The king sought advice of men with sight or men with knowledge, and that knowledge was passed through the king to the generality of the population. True spirituality would give perfect freedom to men and to all people to seek this inmost truth in all possible ways. Now, if we accept life, he says, spirituality which accepts all aspirations towards perfection in man, that would be ideal attitude of true spirituality. It must also seek the same in individual and collective life. A spiritualized society can bring individual and communal harmony and happiness. Sometimes the most adverse conditions are the precursors of such an achievement. If we say that there is nothing in present social constitution which promises the acceptance of spiritual ideal in a collective life, perhaps he says contrary condition is sometimes the best precursor for bringing in a new movement. So it may be that because just now we don't see any sign of it, probably we are preparing for it, getting ourselves prepared for a new attempt to create society. Three steps would be there. First, infra-rational impulses, instincts, that is one. Rationalistic age is second, and supra-rational age is a third. That is what we showed yesterday night. We had seen that the social group passes, or the individual goes through three stages of development. First, an infra-rational stage, a rational stage, and then a movement towards a supra-rational stage. It will be by higher spiritual living and not a outer religious life that this new departure towards supra-rational constitution or supra-rational aspiration of man would be attained. These are not to be taken as successive, not that first infra-rational, then rational, and then supra-rational. No, these stages almost always coexist. There are people who live in the also infra-rational. There are people who live in the rational, and there are some who live in the supra-rational. The stages are not as it were successive. It's not as if one group passes through all that. No. In one group, you will find some who are living infra-rational, some who are in the rational, and some who are living supra-rational, so that they coexist. The savage also has his own idea of spirituality and his own spirituality, in fact. You see? So the infra-rational has something of the supra-rational there. His belief in the medicine man, or in belief in incantation or power of the charm, you see, shows that there is some touch of the supra-rational even in the infra-rational stage of the individual and collective life. They have their own argument and their own reason also. It may not be our reason, but they have their own logic, you see. But the race has to become ready in order to experience the real change towards introducing this element of spirituality. And if the multitude remains infra-rational, then the coming of this spiritual constitution of society would be delayed, because the multitude also must at least learn to think and reason. If not, if the crowd or the group multitude remains infra-rational all through, then it is difficult for an age to take seriously to a constitution in which spirituality or spiritual value will be the highest value. The group must learn to think and exercise its intelligence in order to create atmosphere in which the spiritual seeking can find practical, acceptance by a smaller group. The larger group, that is the multitude, which now very often is living in the infra-rational stage, must outlive the infra-rational stage and move into the rational. Nature develops spirituality by exceptional communities or by nations, and humanity has to reach it by a slow process. Each movement tries to petrify after a shorter or longer activity. Each movement towards the goal of spiritual realization or spirituality becoming a dynamic factor in individual and collective life moves for some time. A beginning is made. Then, after 40 years, 50 years, it tends to petrify, to become, well, fixed. Longer or shorter activity, it gets into a fixed mold. And therefore, the best condition to make this effective movement is that habit of reasoning must become universal. One. And application of will and life, or rather intelligence and will, must be applied more and more to life. Then an atmosphere would be created in which you will find that ushering in of a spiritual value as the highest social value would become easily possible. So that if you have habit of reasoning on a larger scale than it is apparent now, and will and intelligence are more applied to life by a larger number of persons, then an atmosphere will be created in which spiritual value will find easy to percolate into life on a larger scale than it is able to now. And in the 19th chapter, we have the curve of the rational age in which we are passing. Modern age is a constant series of radical progressions. We are progressing radically, introducing certain elements in individual and collective life which have brought sweeping changes. It is a seed time, so to say, a luminous seed time in which seeds are sown, in which man is taking up battles and efforts which he did not do before. Victory and achievement on practical scale. That's how the rational age, when it ushers in its power, first it brings something new. And we say, yes, this must be tried. Well, a trial is made. It is opposed by conservative forces. It battles and then it achieves. Then a time of victory and achievement comes. 30, 40 years, disillusionment. There are three stages through which it passes is, you can have an idea. So that in the rational age, when it ushers itself in, a seed time in which it sows new ideas, new principles, new demands, new values. That is one. Second is effort and battle. In effort and battle, and you can say with it also partial victory. You can combine it as partial victory. Yes, seed time, yes. Seed time, effort and battle, partial victory, and you can say achievement also. And then there is disillusionment.
Effort and battle.
That's it?
Effort and battle.
Yes. That's how it works generally, you see. When democracy, equality, or science, or machinery, you see, production on large scale, take anything that reason has done, and you get that, you see. Partial victory and achievement, and then disillusionment. Then a new idea again, a new idea. Again, it goes to the same. That's how, well, the last 200 years, if you watch the progress, or 150 years, you will see that that is what has happened. Now society newly constructed, and then there is a new social reconstruction takes place. We introduce, well, there was bullock cart and horse and so on, and then plow that was going on. All right, change completely, and then bullock cart gets going to something else. It comes and now everything is wonderful, and people say now never in society before such a thing has happened. Quite right. And then the mechanical plowing comes, and then we say, oh, now look, they were fools, they were doing all these things. We have done something wonderful. There is a partial achievement and victory also. Then there is disillusionment. Afterwards, it is found that it wasn't as wonderful as when we began it. When the seed time came, we thought that that would solve. Well, yes, then we battle, fight with old forces, remove them. To introduce that, you have to do a lot of organizing work, hard work, or research. Then society is being organized on a level. Everybody has to fit in, and a large organization comes into being. Then something happens, and we say, yes, now this is, well, we have attained something. And then by attaining, we think that life will now reach its goal. It doesn't. It seems, oh yes, but what after all? Well, that is how the reason when it gives something, well, society constructed in dissatisfaction, new social idea again comes, new revolution comes, more advanced social principle might perhaps be initiated. So we can put this question, will reason ever be satisfied with her efforts and results? Whether reason could ever make an effort in which it would say, now this is QED, finished, this is the end of the affair. No, will it come to that? Reason will pass through three stages, he says. If reason is allowed to continue with functioning, it will pass through three stages. First, individualistic. Individualistic stage would be its first stage. Second would be socialistic stage. And third would be anarchistic.
Anarchistic.
You see that before socialism, Rosie wrote these things 45 years ago. Well, individualistic age would give anarchy. Individualistic would give, say, for instance, democratic or principle of liberty would be stressed in that stage. In the socialistic stage, state communism or socialism or equality of man and before the state and so on would be emphasized and would be, well, effort would be made to carry it out into life, into collective life. In anarchistic stage, you will have free communism with brotherhood or comradeship as a principle to hold society together. That is the only principle that you can allow. Idealistically, if you drive logic and intellect to its last conclusion, absoluteness, it will say, why should man have any government at all? All outer government is superfluous, unnecessary, shows man is an animal more or less. If he is really man, worthy of his name, well, he must behave in such a way that he doesn't require any government at all. That is you see that line of argument. We are talking of reason. Remember, we are not talking of spirituality. We are talking of reason, and then reason driving itself to the last conclusion would demand that if man is really man, and if every man is really capable of rising to his best rational capacity, he must so behave that he doesn't require anybody to guide him. Why? Well, then you say yes, and then will society dissolve? No, it will organize itself on principle of brotherhood and equality, in the sense that everybody does absolutely correctly what he has to do, and finds out that everybody else is correct and he is correct. That's all. Now, it is this formally, social thinkers did not think with their reason, you see. It was intuitive society which first came into existence. It was not as a rational movement that social organization came into being. It came as an instinct and an intuition. Family organization or tribe or clan, they form themselves intuitively, instinctively, more or less, you see, by some collective impulse which brought people together, believing in some idea, common habits, common custom, common standards of life, and need for standing together in cooperative life. It is that which held them together. But now we find analytical and ideative reason coming and trying to solve this problem of collective life. Reason is coming in and says, I will dictate and I will give you solutions. Because reason can see possibilities, you see. If one discovery is made, then how to apply it in life? Well, reason can work out some 5, 10, 20 possibilities. And then you see how to, should we do it on a large scale? Shall we break up on a small scale? Shall we do it in cottage industry affair, or shall we do it mammoth industries with big, labor population? Well, many ways in which reason can work out the possibilities and apply the discoveries of science or the working out of organizing society on a different principle. And reason can push the realization in life. And we have to put the question to ourselves, how far reason is capable of doing this work? How far would reason be able to carry out? Nowadays, tradition and conventions and old institutions, well, have lost their power. They cannot govern, they can influence partly. So reason has come and taken up that place, and all men must really, if they want to create something new in social reconstruction, all men must learn to think about social problem, or what must be done, what must not be done, what is good, what is not good. It must not be reason of the ruling class only, which is now the case. Now what governs is not the reason of the majority, but reason of the ruling class, isn't it not? I mean, the guides, the people who are the leaders. And a class, or not of the few eminent thinkers, each must think and each must reason out for himself the conclusions about what form social society must take. And each man then must be allowed freedom to govern his life according to the dictates of his own reason. That is ideal. But this does not work out as expected or as we need and we feel. It doesn't work out, you see. Because the ordinary man is not rational. Most of them are infra-rational. They don't think in terms of right or wrong or true or false. They think in terms of interest, impulse, prejudice, or what idea paper, press, book, or somebody gives. That's the common man. He doesn't think. It doesn't work out because, well, ordinary man is infra-rational. He doesn't think impersonally at all. In fact, you should, I don't know here, but in India, the condition is if you go to the voter, he says, we praised you, please leave me alone. Don't bother me. All right, what do you want? You want to take this vote and go. I am not interested in who governs and what happens. He is so much taken up with his own interests. His need to earn his livelihood and to go about and so on. He doesn't know that his very earning will be affected by what that fellow is going to do there. See, if he passes a law by which his neck will be caught, he doesn't realize, but he actually doesn't want. That shows that ordinary man is infra-rational in his attitude towards any new idea of social reconstruction, any values which you create in collective life. He is infra-rational in the sense that he's interested in his own self, in his own impulse, prejudice, or what. Or some paper says, some big leader says, some man whom he thinks is a good man. Well, he believes in this, all right, I believe in it. That's all. He doesn't go into the reason himself. This is 90% of what people do in ordinary mass mind. Secondly, the second reason is reason doesn't make for agreement, but very often it leads to conflicting views. Conflicting views, one man affirms that such and such a thing is the best solution. Another man gives equally cogent reasoning to prove some other thing as a solution, just the opposite. And it doesn't lead to harmony, doesn't lead to agreement, but to conflict. There is therefore disillusionment and failure at the end. When that happens, when we find that, yes, we applied this to life, we tried to organize, and then the masses did not become rational, and then logical thinking led to contrary conclusions with the same amount of reasoning on one side, the same amount of reasoning on the other side, we come to other conclusions. Then there is a disillusionment. And failure of dependence on reason comes here. Generally, when democracy is, for instance, initiated, the dominant class governs in the name of the people or name of the masses, you see. And secondly, what happens in these democratic idea is that a war of classes is brought into existence. Party strife comes into being. And in the party strife, only interests are taken into consideration and not principles. You can say that at best this work of reason, constitution of democracy as a solution for collective problems and organization of collective life, you can say it produces a sort of ordered conflict. The conflict is not disorder and doesn't produce anarchy. It is an ordered conflict, and that is the only compliment that one can pay. But that would not be to say that reason can produce perfection. An ordered or organized conflict is not perfection, isn't it? So you cannot say that reason has produced something which is perfect. That it is not yet able to do. We are told, and many people argue also seriously, the solution will come if we take education, take hold of education and educate the younger generation, you see, and bring about a correct or a healthy economic reconstruction. If you take up economic reconstruction and resort to education, then perhaps the difficulty which our condition of society meets can be solved. Now, if you take up education even, and if it means rational education, then it would mean three things. First, capacity for observation and acquiring information and knowledge. Secondly, capacity for intelligence and judgment. And thirdly, use of this knowledge to apply to life. Capacity for action, which would require high character. So that if we take education, we are going in for three things. One, capacity to observe and develop the natural instrumentation, acquiring intelligence and judgment and will, and thirdly, using that knowledge and will to apply to life, to action, and that would require, well, formation of character. So if education, it is to this. Now, men are certainly more active today and more alive. Capacity to decide, or at least desire to decide and desire to judge, is more widespread now than it was before. Man wants power. Man wants today reward for his faculties. He wants enjoyment of his desires on a much wider scale than he ever did before. The only power today is the power of wealth. He is desiring this. He wants power. And he knows that money is power. He wants the reward for his faculties. The reward is in form of money. Enjoyment of desire requires wealth, power. So he says the power that he sees today is the power of wealth. And this has given rise to huge organized competitive system of society. Competitive system in a society. And cannot make for a harmoniously ordered society. It has led to industrialization. So the change has come from democratic individualism to democratic socialism. It began with democratic individualism, is now leading to democratic socialism. Socialism has taken an industrial and economic appearance. Instead of insisting on equality of man as an individual, as a soul to soul, it has taken up its stand on industrial and economic basis. It has introduced economic and industrial basis in its very inception. True nature of socialism is to replace this organized economic battle by an organized order and peace. This cannot be done by social inequality based upon birth or denial of opportunity to anybody. It cannot also be done by granting complete individual liberty to the individual. If you give complete liberty to the individual, also it cannot be done. equality, not political but social equality, is the basis of this effort, and equality of status. And then it drives this idea to the last and says property must belong to the community. You go last to the logical conclusion of it, isn't it? Then all property must belong to the whole community, and administration of that property must be by the community. No individual must own. In fact, individual himself belongs to the society. From this, when you go logically working out to its absolute conclusion, well, you say the individual must belong to the society, not only his property, but himself, his labor, his capacities, his education, his life, everything that he is and his family must belong to the collective life, because they owe their existence to the organization of collective life. That is the argument. Even the work of thinking has to be done by the community. That's what Russia tried, actually. Why do you want to think? Indoctrination, thinking is ready. You have to be simply accept the thinking, because this is the quintessence of real thinking, has been done by great leaders who have brought about this great, wonderful revolution, and they have the logic and the rational ready. You take in the rational, you don't want to think afterwards. The thinking is done for you. And thinking is in your own good. It is the best thing for you. That is how it is argued. Even the working of thinking can be done by the community and collective mind, and it will decide everything for the individual and do everything by the collective will. Well, then egoism of the individualistic life has to be overcome, it will say. The egoism of the individualistic intelligence will must overcome, and collective intelligence, collective will must take its place. Socialism wants to retain individual liberty and combine it with the rigorous idea of collectivism. Well, if this does not work, then the ideal of intellectual or spiritual anarchism alone remains. If socialism does not succeed in ushering in this new wonderful age, well, then the next possible third possibility was anarchism. Well, anarchism is the only ideal of social reconstruction that remains. And it is based on fraternity if it is to succeed. It is the individual who demands liberty. Now let us see the curve of reason. You see, he says it's the individual who demands liberty. Collectivities have an opposite tendency. It is not prepared to grant liberty to all individuals. It wants to govern, in fact, if it can, govern all by its own ideas, by its own. Its collectivity wants to govern thee. So it tries to press out liberty to the extent that it can. It tries to compel people and take away the liberty so that they may be made happy. You see, the idea is that you will be made more perfect if your liberty is taken away. And it is the individual who demands now equality. Equality may turn out not a remedy, but an obstacle. So the whole working out of the process is brotherhood and comradeship can have certainly a chance, and it is more in keeping with some spiritualistic or spiritual collectivism. Because under socialistic idealism, the only liberty left to the individual would be the freedom to serve the community under the rigorous direction of the state control or state authority, and that will lead ultimately to totalitarianism. Socialism somehow or other must tend to that kind of movement, ultimate to a totalitarian outlook. Essence of socialism is governance and strict organization of the total life of the society by its conscious reason and by its conscious will for the best good and common interest of all. That is the basis of socialistic outlook. And therefore democratic liberty may be discarded by this socialism. It can lead to the dictatorship of the group, what they call the dictatorship of the proletariat, dictatorship of the Communist Party, or on behalf of the collectivity, or in the name of the collectivity. In Russia, socialism has been turned into a gospel. not merely a system of social reconstruction, but almost into a gospel, into something you are compelled to believe in. A social cult enforced by an intolerant, you see, an enthusiastic and recently converted people, you see, at the top. Fascism and communism both are children of the same democracy, the age of reason. And they are fighting, this organization are fighting among themselves on the base of economic organization and on the idea of regimentation of thought. Both are fighting with the liberty of the individual. If you allow this age of reason to reach its culmination in its effort to organize collective life, then it will come to the top with a scheme, with a plan, with an ideal of social life, perfection of collective life. And when reason comes to this conception of perfection of collective life, it will try to organize and press upon life that plan which it has conceived. When it tries to carry out the plan, it will be compelled to deny freedom of thought to other reason. Is it not? You allow reason to come and organize and see life and say, what should be perfect life? Then 5 people, 10 people, 20 people who think that they are the representative of the people, or they think for the whole, or what they think to be the perfection of all, well, they arrive at an organization or at a conception, at a scheme, at a plan, at an ideal, that should be like this. And now, in order to carry it out in life, what they have to do is to enforce it, is it not? You cannot, if you say, no, you also think as you like, then they will never be able to try that experiment, because no 2 reasons or 20 reasons will agree. Therefore, if reason is allowed to govern life, well, what it will do is to come to the top, make a plan, make an ideal, organize life, and when it is allowed with power to enforce itself on life, what it will do is to deny free thought to any other reason but the reason that is representative or claims to be the representative of collectivity. So the end of the curve of reason is that it begins with a revolt against past dominant tradition, creates individualistic and democratic outlook in life, leads straight away to a conception of perfect social life or perfect social organization, which, if it is to be tried, reason must not be allowed to have its say, is it not? Reason trying, therefore, to arrive at a stage in which says that deny the right of reason to others. The right of independent judgment is denied to other people. That is what reason will do. That is what it is doing, in fact. In that case, if reason comes in and puts down a reason that differs, because that's the law. Generally, you see, when you say right to free thinking means you can differ in your thought from somebody else whose thought doesn't seem to be working on the same line, because your line of reason and argument to which by which you come to your conclusion may not be the same line of argument. Another line of argument might lead you to one conclusion. The very same facts may lead you to another conclusion. And if you say, no, you won't try, I will try, that means the age of reason is already, well, turning back upon itself and saying no to its own self. It is saying, no, you can't reason. It says, if that happens, if reason denies the right of rational working to other reasons, in that case, even subjective age cannot come. It must come by a very slow evolution in that case, because it is through free reasoning that some experiment will be allowed. And if reason comes to the top in power, in field of collective or political life, and if it's put down other reasoning, then growth will be impeded. It must come by a very slow evolution in that case, because it is through free reasoning that some experiment will be allowed. And if reason comes to the top in power, in field of collective or political life, and if it's put down other reasoning, then growth will be impeded. A spiritual age, if it is to come, a free exercise of reason must be allowed to the human being. Every society, he says, well, in the 20th chapter, represents a collective being. An individual lives by that collective being and in that collective being. It is by a certain relation of society that he can use and develop his own powers. It can have a collective reason and a collective will. Now, right organization of social life based on equality and comradeship must give to each individual his proper place in society, must give him training, share of work, share of leisure, share of reward. If that is not done, it's not a correct organization of society. Efficiency of the community would be increased enormously if that came to pass. Sacrifice of individual liberty would not mean very much, because today when a man says, I want freedom, he wants freedom for his ego. And you can say it is the infrarational part which requires freedom. You say that I want to give free vent to somebody's reason, but you would say, where is his reason? He has no reason. He is not rational at all. He is infrarational. He is moved by his interests. He is moved by his impulses. He has to be governed. Majority of mankind not being rational and being infrarational, the rational, dictatorship would say, why do you want him to? He has no reason. He is not reasoning at all. So it is in his own interest. It's better that we give him what is good reason for him. It would be called undue freedom, in fact. So collective reason and collective will can exercise control much wisely and more effectively. That would be the line of argument. And the individual may find in obedience to it, a very natural condition. You would find it natural to obey somebody else's reason, collective reason. The state does everything for the individual in that case and sees to it that he is governed by the direction of the state. But if you look at the problem from the psychological point of view, then you can say that man is not a beast. And he is not to be driven. He is not to be governed like the herd. The argument that because he is infrarational, therefore, he has to be herded is not right. What man requires is not, control from outside, but self-control. He has to evolve to a stage when he would control himself. If he is controlled by somebody else, it is not his growth. I would say that is not his proper growth. Collective being of man is a fact, but collective being is a soul and not vital being of the collective life. When we say collective being, soul of a nation, soul of a race, or soul of a culture, you say, when Ireland was fighting for freedom against England, England promised and said that we would give a very good government. And so the argument of the Irish was that good government is no substitute for self-government. A good government is not a substitute for self-government, because it is an expression of the soul that is required. Irish soul, as expressed in Irish culture, Celtic culture, it is an entity, and it is that which has to be encouraged, it has to be allowed to grow, to express itself, and to develop. It is not only merely good government that is required. The collective being is not a vital being only devoted to interest or to prosperity, to production, to give to each individual something which he can, eating and drinking, or production and distribution. There is no such common reason which you can say the collectivity has got. Collectivity has a soul. There is no common reason belonging to all members of a collective life. Therefore, government organized state means government by a small number of individuals who represent or claim to represent the soul of the collectivity. Few effective men who really ruled. And in infra-rational societies, it was the group soul that governed. An individual was then not yet even born. In societies in the primitive conditions in Africa, for instance, or in certain red Indian, societies that existed before, societies existed on an infra-rational instinct of soul life. You see, collective soul was there, which acted instinctively. Individual was not yet at that time born. As the state government develops, we have relentless mechanism of the state, governed by the reason. Man needs freedom, and if he is not developed, he may consent to grow by in the group soul, in the herd and in the mass, and as he grows, he will again need more freedom. And he may consent to limit his freedom for some time, but a time is bound to come when he will revolt, because he will demand freedom. There is no question. He may be infra-rational today, but as soon as he awakes to his individuality, he will want freedom. Freedom of thought, if denied, would mean the end of the age of reason. It's the most important, conclusion which we have to keep in mind, that if reason coming to the top in power denies the freedom of thought, then it is the end of the age of reason. Reason is itself coming to an end of its resources, so to say. Man, the mental being, disallowed to use his own mind. It would come to that. Socialistic stage will have this particular defect, that it will try to curb reason, and it would want to be thorough in its scientific regimentation and regulation of life. It would say everything must be perfect logically, and so no individual freedom and variation would have any much chance. It would be mechanization of life. Mechanization and denial of reason, well, are the two defects of any socialistic outlook that would try to enforce itself on collective life of man today. And difficulty is that life is not mechanical. Life is mobile all the time, varying and changing. It is dynamic. It is progressive. Life has to discover its own soul. It has not to be only imposed some rule from outside by somebody else thinking as to what is best for life. Reason cannot do this function because it is only an intermediary. In thought, it would not matter if reason said this is the only correct thought. But when it comes to life and reason wants to govern life, then it is obliged to invent or create or organize a system. And the system tends to become mechanical ultimately, and life being not mechanical, system breaks down, or life revolts and breaks the system. Rational society would be an advance certainly upon infra-rational societies, but it would not arrive at perfection. Free individual development, if collectivism allows a free individual development, then it may succeed, but then it must spiritualize itself. You can see some working of it in the Bhudan movement of Vinoba Bhave in India. If you want to see how collectivism can be spiritualized today in modern conditions, we have an interesting experiment in India being done by a follower of Mahatma Gandhi, Vinoba Bhave. He is going around in the villages with no government power, with no other organization except his own, inspiration which he has received from within, that human beings must learn to live like a family. The whole humanity is one family. That is the guiding inspiration, so to say. And then he goes to the villagers and gives them the idea that why don't you behave like somebody who has to look to everybody's employment. You should not think, I want to make money. You must say, everybody in the village must find work and enough reward for his work. He is not working on a political system of socialism. No, he has no ism at work. He is only trying to persuade them to admit or to allow or to accept a spiritual attitude. Well, if socialism can spiritualize itself, there is a good chance for it to succeed. But the leader of socialism have a set, gospel of socialism and schemes and formulas and plans, and it's very difficult for them to do so. Man is not an isolated being, and he grows by his relation with other beings or other people, and his freedom must harmonize with the freedom of other people. If man is really to enjoy his freedom must harmonize itself with the freedom of other people. Society is a field of this relationship, and in which individual gets a very good chance for its growth. And you can say that some force is needed to keep the individual infrarational in check. And it is good for the individual as for the society. In infrarational parts of man have to be controlled. But as man advances, the outer law of compulsion must be replaced by an inner law of self-government or self-control. Then only man can move towards perfection. No law and no compulsion. That would perhaps, if you allow it to work to its last, or it would come to enlightened anarchism or intellectual anarchism. It will lead to intellectual anarchism. Now, I think we leave for today there and take up this chapter halfway, perhaps tomorrow or day after, tomorrow evening.
What chapter is this, Purani?
This chapter is
20.
20th.
20th. You finished the 20th chapter?
Yes. I think we have finished 20th.
This experiment that you were describing that they're carrying on in India, is this a fairly simple society that they're doing it in?
Yes, very simple.
Because it seems to me that
In a mechanized society, I don't know how it would work.
that we have more problems in our highly industrialized society
Yes.
than the socialists have.
Yes.
It's just getting into faster and faster.
Yes.
I guess I'm just stupid, but I cannot see the difference between socialism and communism. How you keep socialism from leading to communism. It seems to me that so much power is going to be invested, going to be centralized, that you're going to wind up with a dictatorship.
It would. That is what he is saying. In fact, that is what he says, that if you try to apply socialism to its logical conclusion, it will lead to that. Sure and certain. But if there is political constitution in which democracy is allowed and is admitted as the most essential element, then it would be difficult for that socialism completely to wipe out democracy. That is what we can say in defense of those people who say that our socialism is democratic socialism and not dictatorial socialism. Democratic in the sense that individual is allowed there a right to say something about what he wants, what he doesn't want, what scheme he approves, what scheme he doesn't approve. This liberty is allowed to him. A group doesn't come to the top and suddenly steamroller everybody else. They say nobody can say anything else. Here we will allow you to say what you want to say about what scheme we propose before you. And if it is knocked out, then it will not be allowed or it will not take shape in practical life. This is the maximum freedom, I think, of to which they can give allowance. That's all.
One of the main differences, excuse me, in the approach. Socialism, they'll approach more by education and a slower process. They're willing to approach by a slower process, aren't they?
No.
By violence and resistance.
That will be when it comes to communism. You see, force would be applied to steamroller reason of other people. You know, when you apply
But
force.
I mean, socialism believes in a slower process, doesn't it, in education? Isn't that
Yes,
one of the
yes. One
differences?
of the things is education,
Yeah.
and one of the things is persuasion also. Socialism wants to persuade, and therefore it wants to retain democratic form. In some countries, it wants to retain democratic form and say if our scheme is thrown out, we will not carry it out by force. You see, the point is, a scheme is proposed on a basis of socialism, and the plan is given to the House, to the to the electorate, so to say, and the electorate is allowed to vote. And now, if a scheme is thrown out, well, the scheme doesn't take place. Whereas, same would not take place in a communist country. They would see to it that the vote are secured for them.
But is there danger of socialism, say, under a democratic system like we have here? Isn't there danger that so much power can eventually get to the top that we can find ourselves under a dictatorship? Isn't this possible?
It's not impossible. I wouldn't say it's not easily possible, but it's not impossible. If the people have a very strong democratic tradition.
Going that way, I mean, you're becoming more and more socialistic. I mean, every program, that they put forward.
Yes, but if the people are democratic, strong tradition of democracy, it's very difficult for any country. In England, it's really difficult, even though there the same movement is taking place. But the democratic tradition is so strong that even under socialistic administration, the working out of the machinery has to submit to the democratic tradition.
Well, now, Purani, in our Constitution in this country, we feel that private ownership of property is something sacred. I mean, is this wrong?
Well, socialism would say it is not right. Socialism would say it is not right. You are depriving, you see, it belongs to the nation. Property belongs to the community. Mine, coal, oil, steel, they belong to the whole. How can one man say it is mine? That logic I'm giving. I'm not giving mine. Please don't mistake.
Would you give it yours?
Huh?
Would you give it yours?
Well, to make people rise to that, I mean, it would require a spiritual attitude. It is not impossible, but then to make the whole nation or a majority to rise to that would require a spiritual attitude, that the earth belongs to the spirit, to the divine, and all wealth is of the divine. All wealth is of the divine, meant for the human soul to grow to the realization of that divinity and express it in life. Wealth is necessary. Wealth, nobody says wealth is bad. No true spiritual man will say wealth is something contrary to the divine. Wealth is the power of the divine.
It must be contrary if you must give it up to grow, though. Isn't it?
You are not to possess it egoistically. You have to possess it in the divine or for the divine.
And have it change your attitude.
You don't have to worship.
You are not asked to give up. That means he would say, he would argue that you want to possess wealth for yourself. Is it not? That's a common attitude, and I say people grow by that. I don't say that it's always a thing that doesn't allow people to grow. A attitude of ambition makes a man grow from inertia and idleness to a better degree of development. So I don't say that the desire to possess wealth is always against man's growth, but a stage must come when possession of individual wealth would be regarded as something which one shouldn't have, because all wealth must belong to the divine, because it comes from the divine.
Then there could be no private ownership.
Yes, there can be no private ownership in the sense of possession. Yes, there can be utilization of property or utilization of wealth for one's own, life. They would argue, and their one slogan is, from each according to his capacity or power, and to each according to his need. So that it would not be steamrolling into need. If the need is such that you require plenty, the plenty should be there. If need is such that you require less, the less would be there. It would not be governed by a hard and fast mechanical rule that everybody. Russia tried it in the beginning and failed miserably. They said all will be given equal wages. Intellectual writers, paper, poets, and they found that it does work.
This is not working in China either.
It won't work anywhere because it's against human nature. They had to then import outside people, and they said, we won't work for less. You must give us that much, and they had to accept.
I saw somebody about this the other night, and he said, whenever you take the stars out of the sky for the American boy and girl, and probably this is true for others too, then you're going to lose the soul of the country. You're going to lose something. Which maybe is good. I don't know. I can't believe that right now. But
what did you say? I didn't catch.
If you take the stars out of the sky for young people, they have to have something to work for. They have to be inspired for somehow, and that. Maybe it's our economic setup, I suppose it is, but there must be some goal. He must have some reward.
Yes, that is to say, you see, it would ultimately boil down to the question of purpose of life. What is the purpose of life? And that is a moot question. That is a fundamental question. Normally 90% of people would say success. And out of 90 people who would say success means economic success, isn't it? This is very normal. Well, this is the great mistake.
But we have to outgrow this, isn't that right? Frank?
Yes.
We have to outgrow it. I mean, we won't all of a sudden wake up and.
No, that is to say, life must be accepted as an opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
Growth. Then growth can be through difficulty, through poverty, through less wealth and more wealth. It is also more wealth can make you grow. I don't say no. But then the end of life is put not as mere success, which would nowadays 99 people would say economic success, because it is not success. That is simple. That logic is simple. You get people who have succeeded that way, and you look whether they are, well, you can say they have got fulfillment. You will see they have not. So that you see, life when it only acquires things, possesses, possession or success or something new, make a new discovery, even intellectual life if you take, all that when it is goaded by ambition and self-interest, well, it leads to a circle again and it doesn't lead to fulfillment. That's it, it's gone. That's gone. That's gone.
After you left, that was asking you so many questions, asked me later, does it lead to, is it a sign of growth spiritually? He was talking about working with the American boys during the war, and said they absolutely could not stand the poverty and the starvation. They saw that it made them ill. They became mental cases. He was working with them. This is the man back then. And he said, is it, he couldn't understand, is it a spiritual thing when you can look at somebody who's starving to death and not feel anything, he said?
No.
When you can pass them by? This upset our
So,
boys.
you see, it's a good reaction, I would say. So far as the individual's own remolding of inner life is concerned, it's a good thing. But it solves not the problem. An emotional or sentimental outburst is not the way to solve the problem. You have to go to the very root of constitution of society. I have myself gone through that stage, and so I know very well what it means, you see. That you see the man is there. Then you say, oh, he's starving. You give him something to eat. But tomorrow, day after, and he's not only one. Remember,
Well,
there are thousands. Now, therefore, you have to go to the constitution of society, municipality, government, or state or somebody, and say, now whose responsibility is to find work for these people? Mere sentimental outbursts is only good for oneself. It is good that one breaks his egoistic, self-complacence, and it's good. He grows into wideness. It is very good for the individual. I don't say one shouldn't feel.
what you just said there is an argument in this country today, a very strong one, that you say, if I give this man who's starving something today, this feeds him. Tomorrow, he's not fed. The people who are arguing in this country, we are giving to everywhere. Pretty soon there will be no nation that will be able to give. You see, it's the same argument they are using here against foreign aid.
Well, it's helpful.
What is the argument? I didn't catch.
You just said that you have been through this, that you have seen the man who is starving, and you realize that to feed him today is not the thing, because tomorrow he will be hungry.
Yes.
I said this argument is being promoted here in this country and in relation to our nation, that as a wealthy nation, we are trying to give so much that pretty soon this will no longer be. Everybody will be hungry then. No. This is not applicable. This is not applicable. I tell you why. Because this foreign aid is not given to feed them. A beggar coming to oneself and you're giving alms to him to feed today or tomorrow or for a week would not give him permanent work. But the aid that is extended is expected that the nation or the collective life will build its own life up and stand on its own. You are not going to extend help ad infinitum. And it would be wrong on their part to expect such help. It would be stupid. It is against their self-respect to want any help to unlimited extent. They can say that you have some money, all right, lend us money, and we will try to organize life in such a way that we stand on our own. Whether they will or not is a different question. I don't say that what they expect or what they wish
would happen or come to pass. They might all the time want something more and more. It can happen. I don't say it would not. But the basis on which the help is given is that they are not going to expect all the time help being extended to them, and nobody can give such help, and nobody should expect such a help. I don't think.
I mean, food stuff is being given, and that is not that's not good. I mean, we should
Yes.
be in a,
See the.
To be wise, or we don't really help.
We're restricted, and also we're restricted in the amount of food we give because we give it all away. Some of the other countries can't stop it. Not as simple as that. That's one of the reasons.
No, but one thing that I have noticed in American economy is that so much waste of production is there. Waste of production is a lot in America. That I will say, in spite of whatever good points are there, a lot of things are wasted. Production is wasted. I have seen that, and that could be very much utilized to either to relieve difficulty here or to relieve difficulty somewhere else. I have seen actually, I mean, huge amount of the oranges rotting on the trees. Yes, but whatever it is, that is our social reconstruction is such that it happens.
There's one thing here, though, that we are in an entirely different era than almost any other place in the world today, economically. And that is, our problem is selling what we produce. Overproduction is our problem, not production is our problem. For instance, our farms today are 10 times as productive as the average farm in any place in the world. Mass production. That's why the little farmer's out of business. This is why Nick can't make a small farm like this productive, or anybody else can. Now, we solved too well the problem of production. In fact, we make so doggone much stuff. But what we can't do is get it consumed. This is our problem. This is our problem. Our big problem is today in any company, the least important man in the company is a production man. The most important in the company is a salesman. That's why we've got all this propaganda in sales today, to encourage you and myself to buy this and that, even though we don't need it, because unless we buy these things, these factories won't keep going. Our problem in agriculture is well, we've got, look at this Estes affair here. I mean, we've got billions of wheat stored all over the place. I don't know what they're ever going to do with this stuff. We're paying people to harvest it. And of course, we're giving some of it away, but we can't give it all away, because if we flooded the market with all the free grain we have, we'd put all the other grain producing countries out of business. They wouldn't be able to sell there. We give ours away practically, or at a very low premium, and they sell it. And if we went in there in the market and gave it away, for instance, if we offered free of charge to India all the grain, they wouldn't pay somebody else who they buy grain from. And in order to keep our international relations on some sort of even keel, we've got to be very careful about how much agriculture products and where we give them, because we're interfering with somebody's son.
Well, Purani, too, that about the oranges, wasting on the trees, I think that could very well have happened because they've just recently organized unions amongst the farm labor in California. And the farmers have to rebel against this in some way, because they wouldn't be able to afford to have their oranges picked at the rate they would have to pay to the laborers. That's what the problem is right now. It isn't willful waste. It's a sort of an inevitable result of consequences.
And they can't sell the oranges for the price they
You see,
I know.
for refrigeration here, we have less waste in fruits than any country in the world, because before we had wholesale refrigeration, if you couldn't eat it, it rotted away. Now, most of our crop is packed away for another year or two.
Well, I think this was just more or less a temporary phase. I mean, this doesn't always happen, Ronnie. And it's just right now, don't you think? They're just having this difficulty with unions and the labor in the farm industry. See, and it isn't.
It's the orange crop now, citrus crops they either are sold as fresh fruit or frozen.
Well, but it's union business in far in California, and I think that's what it's the result of that, I think. They haven't solved that yet, what they can do about it. And it's like strikes, you see.
Yes,
It's like a strike, you see. It's a temporary thing that has to be solved. It's not really a sign of waste in that sense. I mean, it's
But it's a real problem. I mean, the businessman will say, what am I going to do? I mean, these are
Vicious circle.
Yes. This is real.
Union business. Union business.
Well,
We have
on
to
the other-
overpass it.
on the other hand, we got a democracy, and this fellow is picking oranges, says, I'm not getting enough out of it, so.
Right, and yet he can't even give them away. I've had people tell me I have given my fruit to someone and they'll come and pick it and they won't come and pick it.
What is the solution?
So,
Yeah, a good example of reason trying to decide.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Everyone, that's a good example of reason trying to decide things. Everyone has a reason.
Yes, of course.
The reason's always the best.
Yeah.
You have to take an attitude if you want to solve these problems, and that collectivism is not, collective life is not prepared to take such attitude. That's the problem, human nature. And that is what insistence we have been trying to say to ourselves all along the studies, that problem is not outside, problem is man. Problem is man. By doing this, that, nothing will happen. Something must happen to him, then something will happen outside.
Well, then, Purani, couldn't we present to our young people what we started asking? What are we going to say to the young people? What will their goal be? What will their interest be?
Be to
What
grow.
are their driving
We
force?
will only say,
If we could-
yes, drive towards the direction of growth, not acquirement and outer success.
And that's right.
That we
If
can
could,
say.
even though they had to go through this.
Yes, go through
economic thing.
difficulty, through poverty, through opposition, through anything. Well, growth is not necessarily a bed of roses. So, yes.
Rather than the other goal, even though they were going to go into our economic system and
Yes.
make money, and that,
Yes,
but
It's
still,
not
it was
bad.
after their goal,
Yes.
growth and inner unfoldment.
Yes.
That was-
acquiring money might also tend to that growth. I don't say that acquiring money would always be retrogression, not at all. In some cases, getting money and capacity to develop getting money, it might be growth. For some individuals, it would have growth.
Well, I personally think that as long as we're governed by nations that think rationally, we're going to stagger along the way we are.
yeah,
It'll be a little bit better today and a little bit worse tomorrow.
yeah,
Well, that's one problem. We're going to have more problems in this country.
Mm.
And to talk about the Indian well, how are we going to be able to stand up on a free market in this country and maintain a standard of living that's 3 or 4 times as high as anybody else?
we'll have to let
What
them-
right, for instance, have we got as Americans to get $10 a day, or over in Italy, they get $2?
But we have to spend $10 a day too.
Yes, but I mean, the point is that they're gonna come, our system is a free system, and they're coming in with products that are made by people
Yeah.
that get $2 a day and are right now satisfied. Tomorrow they run on 2.5, but today they're $2 a day and undersell our product, and our people won't have jobs.
Well, we can't compete with it. We'll have,
you know,
Yeah, that is what is happening.
This is, well, come down to our level, well, this means that all the people in the factories are gonna have reduced their wages. Who's gonna make them do that?
well, this thing, like,
Mr. Kennedy made a big deal of this, I think, that free trade. I listen to Canadian radio quite a bit because I'm on the border. And, about 2 weeks ago, everybody up in the Northwest got highly excited because the market's being flooded with Canadian lumber. It's cheaper than American lumber, see. And there went the president and said, well, we won't count Canadian lumber, so we'll raise the duty on it. Then somebody else comes along and British this is underselling it, there you have it. And that's the only reason they have protections. It doesn't make the Canadians feel any happier.
if we're gonna be one nation, one world, we're gonna have to do something.
One continent. I mean, Canada and the United States should stand together. Any two nations in the world should.
Well, they're having a hard time now economically, and the first thing to do, we clap on a duty on their lumber, they don't like it.
We need their.
Make a friendly feel.
started,
But the same thing happens as Nick was telling the other day about the sheep raising in Australia. That they do it cheap, so cheap that Americans cannot raise the sheep here.
Yeah, we can.
The importation of sheep from Australia is cheaper than raising, you'll see the herd here.
No, the sheep men here, they can sell their sheep in this country less than we can sell.
Well, you got Japan is underselling it.
They raise the sheep in Australia and ship it over here and sell it $2 cheaper than we can raise it in this country.
No.
It's fact.
It's just religious sheep.
That's fine.
That's just one of the life.
Regardless of what I'm gonna say one thing, in behalf of our young people too, Purani, regardless of we hear a lot about juvenile delinquency here. I see, an honesty and sincerity in these young people of what to do with their lives, not based on where I can make the most money. I feel this among our young people today. I don't believe that their whole goal is where can I make the most money, as some may think.
No, I don't think that is so. They are prepared to work. What I see is that they are prepared to work. Only not overwork, but they are prepared to work and see that they get the legitimate return for that work. I don't think that it is. Yes.
That we find among them and talking to them, where can I do the most good, or money is not the thing that's foremost of all in their minds.
Of course, you're lucky living in a small community like that. It's encouraged large communities to live with that. Where they just don't have the outlet.
In big cities, perhaps it makes some difference. In big cities, it makes some difference.
There's a very, very good book called Man of the Bridge, and where he has a very good answer about delinquency. And he says that he says again that the young people don't have fulfillment. It has frustration, meaning that they don't have the spiritual answer.
I mean, all the people have fulfillment.
No, I'm just talking about delinquency now. So, I think too that's a very good book, that Man the Bridge.
I heard a remark by some commentator on the radio the other day made a statement that this is why many of the young people are going in for communism, because it offers them a plan, a pattern, something to hold on to, because they never had any spiritual help or growth through childhood. They reach manhood and wonder, what is this all about, and this is something here, this is a goal, this is something idealistic to work toward. And then because they were let down as youngsters, that they're seeking this. Do you think there could be any truth in this?
I don't think that is only catchword because of advertisement and because of propaganda in the papers and because of Communist Party throwing its literature all over the world, free and, giving a technique of what to do and so on, how to get at power. And it promises young people as if it was like a geometrical proposition, 3 sides of a triangle and so on. So if you do this, they've got a technique you don't know. Have you seen that? They've got a technique of how to get to power. What lessons to give to your own group, indoctrination. So what you have to believe in, this 1, 2, 3 booklets regularly giving, then how to get at power. And you see, it seems that now it's only a question of geometrical proposition being worked out and we go to power and we just do what we like. Of course, I don't think that they go to anything much, but it upsets their psychological whole outlook, you see, and then makes them think that they could do what perhaps is very impossible. I don't think they could do that, because when they come to power, they would realize what it is. And even after training, they might change their mind. The wielding of power, when it comes to actual wielding, is quite a different proposition.
There are actually more differences in economic extremes in Russia and the United States. A person who is high up in the Communist Party has many more privileges and economic divorces and everything else than the millionaire in the United States, because it was even not traffic at all. The millionaire is taxed way up in the top right.
There isn't the difference in here they all eat next to each other. They're all more or less the same. It doesn't matter whether a man has. I don't feel that we worship people with money here. I mean, I think you take people for what they are.
Well, communism, the Russians have distorted the meaning of the word. Actually, the Russians have totalitarianism you're talking about. We've had several communistic societies in the United States. The Brook Farm in Boston, the Oneida community in New York. And it does mean, the Russians have taken this word, and this is their kind of government. But actually, pure communism is theoretically just as fine as form
Yes,
of what livelihood as anything else.
But man is equal to it.
Well, the Russians never tried to do it anyway. I mean, right from the start, Lenin and Marx grabbed the power. They said, well, these people are too stupid. They can't see different liberty. It's probably right. And Russians have.
Are we governed by the ruling class when we can produce supremely?
What is a ruling class?
Ordinary man from Missouri.
Well, I was gonna ask that question. I was thinking that the labor is, with the unions and so forth, this could be considered one ruling class here, couldn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
For all of them, a very great,
United States, and there's a big organization, I mean, the singers, rather than presently, yeah, quite a complicated problem. It's quite a complicated problem, no?
One more son. Yeah. And he gives an exhibition in Massachusetts where we're in. His brother decided he wanted to be senator, and they just flew together and got alive.
Getting into politics now, I'm sure.
Things were not as good in Japan. Is that because the Americans came?
No, I think the Japanese themselves had taken a wrong turn before the Americans came. They had themselves taken a wrong turn of imitating everything European. You see, and they thought that this is a shortcut. They wanted to imitate everything European. You see, it was the last century when in 1904 that the first Russian war, the Russo-Japanese war as it is called. Before that, in the end of the last century, means 1872 and 70s, they realized that unless they modernize themselves, their very safety is in danger. This was correct. There was no mistake about it. They were not wrong. Because 5 nations went and bombarded their ports. They closed their ports to any foreign trade. They said, we don't want any trade. And this is a demonstration that nobody can remain isolated today. It is not bad, or nobody wanted to be bad, but actually 5 nations came, including America, and bombarded their ports. You open your ports and we must trade with you. So,
What is that? Ooh,
Oh.
what on earth? Those,
Well, he was
Those-
born in Japan.
no, in 1847,
yes.
we went over there, and America had never tried to go over there, and succeeded in making a treaty with the Japanese. Now, the people that were in Japan were the Dutch,
Portuguese, but English.
not the United States. No,
5 nations was not United
no, the
States.
United States had up until World War II. The United States had never taken arms against Japan.
Which 5 nations went, I don't remember now.
Well, we at that time weren't powerful enough to do it anyway. We had nothing. The first time that we appeared in Asian affairs was in the Boxer executive, and this was in 1900 when in China. And this was the first time that the United States ever took part in any operation of any type as far as Asia.
Yes, so in Japan, at least 5 ports were opened out. Then they set about reconstituting their house and said, this we will be nowhere like that.
Well, I think perhaps you may be
Count Ito was sent with a commission to study constitutions of Europe. And they took 5 years going around the whole world studying their constitution. And they brought here to Japan, to what you call Emperor Meiji, their report that this has to be done. That all the orthodox state, you see the traditional samurai domination and shogun rule must come to an end. And they voluntarily submitted their power to the central constitution, which was then organized into, well, something which was an imitation of some states in Europe. They made up a sort of a constitution. And they set about making war preparation as their first thing. You see, war materials and industry. Industrialization on large scale, machinery and war. And they thought that if they can fight, we can also fight. And in Asia, we are they were wonderfully organized people and very fine people. Japanese are not they're really wonderful people that way. You see, like English on that side and Japanese on this side. A really good, race that has got grit and capacity. So they organized themselves and said, all right. And when Russia gave them the first chance, well, they showed that they could fight. And Russia was isolated, not supported by European power. So Russia, distance and Russian attitude at that time in organization under the Tsar Nobody was very enthusiastic to get himself killed for Tsar, you see. So naturally it didn't come to mind. The winning of that war sent, wine to their head.
Well, of course, the United States was one that really saved them because they intervened and.
Yes, brought about a peace, I think. Yes, their peace was due to their intervention. Said that.
But the United States was never in Japan. They came in on a mission under Commodore Perry in 1847. And this was the first time in the Shogun, the days of the Shogun, this was they'd just thrown out the Portuguese and they'd thrown out the Dutch.
Dutch, yes.
Now, those are the only two, as far as I know, that had any extraterritoriality privileges. I don't think the British were active in China, but not in Japan. And, but we never exerted, that's one thing the United States hasn't been guilty of, exercising the right of extraterritoriality. We were probably born a little too late to escape that evil. We have to.
Could we move this discussion into the living room? We're getting towards 12.